Last week, Vladimir Putin added 4 Ukrainian oblasts to Russia by decree. By means of nuclear threats, the Kremlin wants to maintain its jurisdiction over the annexed area. The annexation of these territories will not be significant for their nuclear protection. In addition, Russia is trying to ensure that China and India remain indifferent to this conflict. Today, the Italian daily La Repubblica reported that Russian submarine K-329, Belgorod, with 6 Poseidon missiles had left its base. The missiles are capable of triggering a radioactive tsunami. NATO has issued an intelligence report on this matter with a warning. The Belgorod ship is armed with an underwater nuclear drone named Poseidon. This is one of those types of weapons that Putin has been bragging about for a lot of years. So, in fact, against Ukraine, this Poseidon is unlikely to be used. It's a signal sent to the United States that somewhere it's been subbed in the Atlantic and they're going to try to send it towards the east coast. So it's a bluff, but it raises the stakes in this nuclear game. So far, over 60,000 Russian soldiers have died in the war. According to experts, the piling up of the failure of Russian troops on the front is a strong excuse for the Kremlin to use nuclear weapons in the conflict.
And do you take the threat? I mean, you have to take the threat seriously.
You have to take the threat seriously.
And I mean, you talked about a precedent set by the United States.
You have to take that seriously. And Jake Sullivan has publicly stated that the U.S. has communicated to Russia what would happen in response to that.
And what would happen?
Well, again, I have deliberately not talked to Jake about this.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give you a hypothetical, we would respond by leading a NATO, a collective effort that would take out every Russian conventional force that we can see and identify on the battlefield in Ukraine, and also in Crimea and every ship in the Black Sea Fleet.
So it would bring America and NATO into the war. I mean, it would be an Article 5 situation, basically.
Not an Article 5 because they're not part of NATO, but it would be a U.S. and NATO response to something that is absolutely.
I mean, the argument's made the radiation would extend into NATO countries. It effectively would be an attack on NATO.
Yeah, and perhaps you can make that case. The other case is that this is so horrific that there has to be a response. It cannot go unanswered, but it doesn't expand. It's not nuclear for nuclear. You don't want to, again, get into a nuclear escalation here, but you have to show that this cannot be accepted in any way.
The threats are third rate. It's just propaganda. Putin, on the other hand, has already started to be openly aggressive towards NATO. The question is what happened in Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. According to experts, the nuclear blackmail by Vladimir Putin should be treated as an element of psychological warfare. Moscow's nuclear threats are an attempt to force Kiev to surrender through negotiation. Russia today will want to escalate primarily 3 elements, as I have been emphasizing for a long time: nuclear intimidation, energy intimidation, and mobilization intimidation. The possibility of this conflict escalating to a wider pan-European scale. Russia plans to buy potassium iodide. The agent effectively protects the thyroid against radioactive radiation. The Kremlin will allocate nearly 5 million rubles for this purpose. Experts have reassured that a nuclear attack against Ukraine is unlikely, and the current actions are routine and are carried out every year. In the absence of the ability to maintain occupied territory, which after so-called pseudo-referenda is treated as Russian, the only alternative may be the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Of course, such a move is a last resort and means a complete isolation of Russia internationally, additional economic sanctions, and eventually a retaliatory strike by the United States and NATO. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces took the initiative in the annexed Kherson Oblast. Since Friday, Ukrainians have crossed the borders of the areas attached to Russia several times, regardless of Moscow's announcements about a possible nuclear retaliation. Taking control of this region will enable a double strike from the west and north, and will create the conditions for the encirclement of Russian forces in this area. At least twice a day I receive reports from our military personnel about the next successes of our counter-offensive. The list of estates liberated from the occupation is growing constantly. The liberation of Liman in the media caused the most emotions, but our successes are not limited to this city. Poland equivocally supports Ukraine's position on the illegal annexation of territories in the east of the country. Today, the Russian ambassador, Sergei Andreev, was summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The ambassador learned about our position, heard our objection, and disagreed with the allegations. Meanwhile, the Russians are shelling the area of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from time to time. According to experts, damage to its infrastructure may cause negative radiation effects. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Poland is prepared for the related potential nuclear threat.